I think in Bitcoin, right, that you can take the position that is the protocol working or is the protocol not working? It looks to me like the protocol is working. It's the most successful monetary protocol in the history of the world. It's gone from 0 to $1.4 trillion in 15 years. It looks like it's on a path to go to 14 trillion, and I don't know why it wouldn't go to 140 trillion. So I look at it right now, and it looks like the protocol as it stands is capable of going to the point where it constitutes 5, 10, 20% of the capital in the world. It's going to change and inject freedom, sovereignty, and sound money into every country, every company, every institution. That's the path we're on right now. And so why would you want to interrupt that?
Bitcoin, in its short 15 years of history, is currently worth $1.4 trillion in its entirety, but Michael Saylor believes it's on its way to 100x to being worth $140 trillion. In Saylor's latest interview with What Bitcoin Did, he broke down why 2024 is a game-changing year for Bitcoin and a tsunami of institutional capital is beginning to flow into the asset. Just this week, we saw another US publicly traded company announce that they have adopted a Bitcoin standard like Microstrategy. Healthcare company Semler Scientific announced that they had invested $40 million into Bitcoin, making it a treasury asset. Their stock price rose over 30% following the announcement. It's this trend of institutional adoption of Bitcoin that is going to fuel its rise to a $140 trillion market cap. At $140 trillion, the price of one Bitcoin would be worth over $6.6 million per coin. Without further ado, let's jump into the highlights of Saylor's latest outlook.
I think there has been a sentiment shift throughout the Bitcoin community to look further in the future. I think there has been a positive sentiment shift in media, in the financial, television networks. It used to be people lamented nobody talked about Bitcoin or they talked it as scammy. And I think we legitimized Bitcoin as an asset class with CNBC and Bloomberg and Fox. And I think a lot of private companies, got very heavily involved. I get letters from people that are private investors, and also everywhere I go, I meet somebody that says, "Oh, I watched one of your videos and I finally got Bitcoin and I started buying heavily." So a lot of private investors, a lot of families, a lot of private companies. And, like my first podcast with Pomp, he always had this question. At the end of the day, he'd ask a question, he goes, and I watched his previous podcast and I noticed he always said, "So do you have a question for me?" And I looked at that and I thought, I'm gonna have a question for him. So in my first podcast with Pomp, what my first question was? My first podcast, my first question, and Pomp was the most influential podcaster in the Bitcoin space. I said,
that is debatable.
At the time.
Still debatable.
Okay. I thought.
No, you messaged me and I was like, who is this guy? And I ignored it. And then you went on Pomp. So I was like, shit.
Yeah, I messaged a lot of people the day we bought $250 million of Bitcoin, and like half of the OGs ignored me.
Yeah.
But I'm on Pomp's podcast. He says, "You have a question for me?" And I said, yeah, I noticed Jack Dorsey likes Bitcoin. He tweets about it. He seems to really appreciate the value of it. He runs a publicly traded company, Square. Do you want to join forces with me? And let's go ask Jack if he'll buy some Bitcoin. And Pomp goes, that's kind of interesting. And then a few weeks go by, maybe a month go by, and Square announced that they bought Bitcoin.
Yep, I remember.
And that was a game changer. I thought, at the point they did that, I thought, we're good now. We're going to win. Like that was the point at which I thought we're going to win. Two public companies took a position, and then when Elon came along and Tesla bought Bitcoin, that was three public companies, and perception of Bitcoin in mainstream media, it's crossed the front page of Wall Street Journal, New York Times, et cetera. So I think we accomplished a lot in those 4 years, but it doesn't surprise me that you don't see 100 or 1,000 publicly traded companies adopting Bitcoin as a primary treasury reserve asset in those 4 years, because I think the modern era, the institutional era of Bitcoin adoption starts January 2024, right? And I think what changed in January 2024 was the SEC approved 10 to 11 spot Bitcoin ETFs. And that started an avalanche. And I think today there's like 24. There's 22 last week, and there were 2 added in London or getting added. So we went from a perception that this was not an endorsed or legitimate asset class at the regulatory level. And someone could have said, I think the SEC is going to ban it, or they're going to deem it a security or something. And the world changed by the middle of January. And now it was clear that it wasn't going to be banned. And then at the same time in January, the accounting profession offered fair value accounting. They changed the accounting guidelines, and they made it optional starting in January and mandatory next January. So in a regime where it is uncertain whether the administration will deem Bitcoin a commodity or security, and they haven't definitively spoken, and in a world where the accounting profession requires that you adopt indefinite and intangible accounting. Indefinite and intangible accounting is the most toxic, prejudicial, discriminatory accounting treatment you can have. If I didn't want you to buy something or invest in something, I would give it indefinite intangible accounting, because that means you can only write it down. You can never write it up. And so you could have $15 billion or $150 billion of something, and it could be held on your balance sheet at $100. And not only can you not ever acknowledge it, all of your losses under indefinite intangible, they actually infect the P&L. So if a normal company bought $1 billion of Bitcoin and it traded down 30% and then traded up 150%, they would be showing a $300 million operating loss. If you look at the 42,000 publicly traded companies and you went to a CFO in 2023 or 2022 and you said, I think I want to buy Bitcoin, they would have said, well, the accounting's a real problem. The accounting is going to, let me tell you how much of a problem it is. It's going to obscure all of your P&L and all of your balance sheet such that your EPS doesn't have any useful information anymore. And it means that any investor is going to have to reconstruct their own view of your business. So it takes financial reporting from something where I can look at a glance in 30 seconds and figure out whether you had a good quarter, to I have to spend 3 hours thinking about it. And so that's kind of a non-starter. So I think that we're late May, and the era of institutional adoption for Bitcoin started in January. And it's like if you went back to 1994, and we said, well, the first companies in the world rolled out their website in January of 1994, and now it's May of 1994. And we're sitting in a podcast, you're saying, well, Michael, are you surprised that more companies aren't, rolling out websites or don't appreciate the web? And I'm like, well, it's really year one. And give it 4 more years, right? Give it 10 more years, and you'll see that the consensus will be, of course, you need a website, just like, of course, you need Bitcoin. In the past few days, this literally happened over the weekend, I think. This weekend, I think you saw the political wind change direction. This became a political issue, and the strategists think, wait a minute, 80 million people with a Coinbase account, or 80 million Americans with crypto, and a big crypto lobby, and we're going to be on the wrong side of this. There is no one that's going to vote for you because you're anti-crypto or anti-Bitcoin. No, there are no votes. There is an army of people that'll vote against you. So I think the White House changed policies, the Democratic Party changed policies. The signal of that was Chuck Schumer in the Senate voting in favor of the repeal of Sub 121. And you can see why he might. Basically, Wall Street's adopted crypto. Wall Street's adopted Bitcoin. They want to custody it. They want to securitize it. And the crypto industry is just fed up. I mean, they've had enough. And, it's like, I think Sun Tzu says, you've got your enemy cornered, leave them with an escape. Okay, I think that the regulators overplayed their hand in this regard, or a regulator overplayed their hand. if you basically got an industry that represents 80 million Americans and their only option is to fight you or die, it's a battle to the death, right? It's that's a very difficult fight. You polarized it. So I think that the dam burst this weekend. Monday morning, the policy of the administration flipped, and now I think they realize that they're best to accommodate, give Wall Street what it wants, give the banks what they want. I think there's a lot of details yet to be figured out, like what will happen next. But all of the signals in the market suggest that the Republicans will be violently pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin, and the existing administration, the Democrats, will move to accommodate.
Reluctantly pro-Bitcoin.
They will move to accommodate and stop taking such an obstinate position.
It's wild, though, isn't it?
And it is wild. It upends everybody's model.
Yeah.
It's like when things get political, and this gets very political, then you just have to rethink all of your premises. And so here's what I think. I think 2 weeks before, the world looked like Bitcoin was going to be the only asset securitized and offered as a spot ETF by the Wall Street establishment, and it was going to spread as the one legitimate crypto asset. I think right now, the best expectation is the crypto asset class will be legitimized, supported by both parties. There's an industry. Crypto is an asset class. There's an entire range of use cases, 24/7 digital trading, digital art, NFTs, tokens, decentralized this, functionality, DeFi. There's a lot of things that will be considered in a more open light, and Bitcoin will be the leader of the crypto asset class. And if you look at it and say, well, is this good for Bitcoin or not? Yeah, I think it's good for Bitcoin. I think, in fact, it may be better for Bitcoin because I think that we are politically much more powerful, supported by the entire crypto industry, right? They obviously have a lot of political power, a lot of users, and they serve as another line of defense for Bitcoin. So I think instead of someone saying, well, there's one crypto asset, maybe I'll allocate 1% of my money to it, I think mainstream investors might say, oh, there's a crypto asset class now, and maybe we'll allocate 5% or 10% to the crypto asset class, but Bitcoin will be 60% or 70% of that. So I actually think it could accelerate institutional adoption.
We're back to indexing.
It's good for marketing. Yeah, there'll be all these other things that'll happen, and you just kind of have to rethink, all of your models and move forward in a new world. With the caveat that I looked at, last night, FIT 21, the crypto bill was passed in a landslide by the House of Representatives.
73 Dems voted for it?
Yeah. I don't know the exact number, but it was like 2/3, 1/3. So it was a 66% or something majority. It's a 484-page bill. Okay. So I started reading it, and reading, it's hard to read 500 pages and internalize it, but I'm sure they haven't read it.
Yeah.
And it goes to the Senate. And so I imagine there'll be a lot of debate about what goes into 484 pages. What clearly they want to do is they want to create a regulatory process to establish a digital commodity and define decentralization and define a digital commodity and treat the rest. I think that, again, this would be political, but the difference is instead of one party has taken the position, limited Bitcoin, nothing else. We're afraid of Bitcoin. The only explanation I can come up with for why you would believe in Bitcoin but be so resistant to Bitcoin options, in-kind creates, and Bitcoin custody for banks is Bitcoin's so good, we don't want it to go too fast. We don't want it to grow too quickly because it might destabilize the traditional system. But one party was limited Bitcoin and the other party was crypto. And now we've got one party, we're defined by crypto advocacy. very pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin, aggressively pro-crypto, and the second party, responsible crypto, responsible Bitcoin, but we're enthusiastic, right? I mean, that's how the playing field has shifted, and that will ripple to the rest of the world, right? However the US goes, it'll go to Singapore, the UAE, the EU, and there are even signs that it's already rippled into Hong Kong, but it may ripple back into China. And so ultimately, I think 2024 will definitely be viewed as a pivotal year, but I don't see how you can view it as anything other than incredibly auspicious for the adoption of Bitcoin by nation states, large banks, institutional investors. And there's just an explosion in global consensus that this is an idea whose time has come, and we'll be living with a lot of other crypto ideas along the way for quite a while to come, I think. But none of them are threatening to us at this point. I think Bitcoin has gotten too mature, has become too powerful to be threatened by another crypto. I think this is going to be a case of a rising tide is going to lift all boats.
So there's some highlights from Michael Saylor's latest interview with What Bitcoin Did. As we've seen, the potential for Bitcoin to reach a $140 trillion market cap is becoming increasingly plausible with growing institutional adoption. Companies like Semler Scientific are setting the stage, demonstrating confidence in Bitcoin's future by integrating into their financial strategy. If the trend continues, we could be looking at a seismic shift in the financial landscape, where Bitcoin becomes a central pillar of corporate treasuries worldwide. With 2024 shaping up to be a pivotal year, the influx of institutional capital could drive Bitcoin to unprecedented heights, bringing us closer to that remarkable $6.6 million per coin valuation. Anyway guys, hope you all enjoyed today's video and that provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.